We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Archaeo Animals. This episode we will be talking about exotic species in the archaeological record. As always, I'm Alex Patrick, and with me,
Simona Falanga.
Okay, so this started as an exotic species in the archaeological record episode, but fair warning, it very swiftly became kind of a exotic pets episode.
Yeah, sort of very little bone evidence and very anecdotal in some interesting things in the written record.
We're talking about exotic species. We're kind of referring to, species that aren't native to the region or animals that are not often found in specific contexts. So, a wild animal that you would find in a domestic context. But the problem is that I guess that kind of got muddled in a way where the best examples I could find were pets, which I guess makes sense,
Well, it would do, because I guess wild animal, because we've covered it in earlier episodes, but a wild animal in domestic context, because depending on what evidence you find on it in terms of a butchery and pathology, it may well be an animal that was hunted and consumed for food.
Yeah, and I guess the word exotic in general is a very subjective word. We did an episode, a couple episodes back, on invasive species, and kind of there's that dichotomy of invasive species versus, non-invasive species, and exotic is a bit more flexible, I guess.
Yeah, because I guess in general just be a non-native species, but I guess the term exotic makes you think it's just from really far away.
Yeah, which was an issue that I realized when I was doing the research for this. But to be fair, also exotic pets are probably more fun to talk about. Anyway.
Fun/infuriating.
Fun. This is going to be a fun, infuriating episode for many people, ourselves included. And I guess it's probably because things never changed since, exotic imports still happen today. I think that's the pet trade is the largest contributor to modern day invasive species, which is wild. And I believe they're all in Florida, because those are the ones that I always think about.
I'll take your word for it. But we do see that. I think we discussed it in the invasive species episodes, that a lot, for example, in Britain, a lot of the invasive species were just the Victorians bringing things because reasons. Oh, that's an interesting looking squirrel. We'll bring it over. Oh, right. Whoopsies. Oh, muntjac, Chinese water deer, wallaby, insert animal here.
In some ways, we kind of covered some of this in our previous episode. But I guess just kind of a quick example. So we were saying, rabbits that were brought to Britain by the Romans, which is based on a tibia fragment that was found at Fishbourne Roman Palace. And if anyone from Fishbourne Roman Palace is listening, please give me a postdoc. I know you're offering one soon. But yeah, it was found by Faye Worley and it had no butchery marks. So as you were saying, a lack of butchery marks, lack of consumption evidence. It's probably some kind of pet thing. It was or kept in confinement. And rabbits were native to Spain and Portugal. So they were probably brought over and kept as a pet for the wealthy inhabitants of Fishbourne.
The famous Iberian hare, as the Romans refer to it.
Do they?
They just thought you have hares, and this is the Iberian hare.
It's very fancy.
I mean, we discussed it in the rabbit episode. I mean, the genus Lagomorph is literally hair-shaped.
I always forget about that.
So a hair-shaped thing, but smaller. Rabbit.
Science is really a joke, isn't it? It's really just, oh God.
What does it say about us?
I mean, yeah, it says that we've been the same for a very long time, for what I understand from it.
But in a way, that's what I like about archaeology. I mean, not in terms of keeping exotic pets in small cages, not that bit, but just seeing that continuity of how humans are basically the same, no matter which time period or where in the world you go. It's pretty much the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this in previous episodes. It's like the idea of finding, and I guess it's perfect for this episode, because the idea of like, oh, this is an exotic animal found in this archaeological record. I wonder what it means. Was it traded, whatever? Was it like kept as a pet? Was it something religious or whatever?
Fertility rituals,
up and down. There's like also a really good chance it was someone who's like, this is cool.
Yeah, just like, oh, that looks quite cool. I'm gonna keep it.
Yeah, I'm looking at my desk right now, and it's full of crap that I've like picked up.
I mean, like, it's another example of, say, exotic animals in the archaeological record. I mean, more like the written record. But according to Plautus, a Roman writer, there's evidence for monkeys being kept as pets in Italy as early as the 3rd century BC. Actually, I got a funny anecdote on it, actually. There's written records of this man from Ephesus called Periplectomenos. He was quite irate, and he was asking anyone seen climbing his roof to be removed from the premises, and that he would absolutely not accept "I'm after my monkey" as an excuse.
I mean, who among us hasn't climbed someone's roof and then used the excuse, "I'm after my monkey"?
It's like the dog ate my homework. No, I was looking for my monkey.
Again, things literally never change. It's just the same stuff over and over again. Humans will human.
I do want to know the backstory behind that one. If anyone listening here knows about the woes of Periplectomenos, please let us know.
If you're friends with Periplectomenos, if you personally know Periplectomenos, please contact us. We would love to know more. But yeah, I love stuff like that. Like, to go on a bit of a tangent, it is like my favorite thing about archaeology in general is finding the little like. It almost sounds demeaning to say the little human things, but it's kind of what it is. You know, it's not just about, this is the subsistence pattern for this set of people over thousands of years. Sometimes it's just like, yeah, someone just dropped something here.
Well, it's like it's the archaeology of the mundane in a way, or of the just because. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no rhyme or rhythm, or not necessarily a ritualistic or any reasoning behind it. Just, I liked it.
Exactly. It's weird to be talking about the archaeology of the mundane in an episode where we claim to be talking about exotic animals.
I mean, depending on what sort of time period or area, like, it seemed like a fairly commonplace thing. So I guess you're like, oh, you got a pet monkey. Oh, wow, well, I've got 10.
Yeah, it's weird because exotic pets in the past have this like weird type of contrast, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word for it, where you have all these species that haven't really traveled across like the way that they are now. So a lot of them are extremely novel and, quote unquote exotic, but you also don't have the kind of like enforcement against these exotic pet trades. So it's kind of just like anyone's game as well.
Pretty much.
I mean, if I like saw a giraffe for the first time, I would 100% bring it back if I could,
I'm just trying to imagine you like trying to wrangle a giraffe onto like a boat or something. Like, how could you get a giraffe like to go with you?
You clothesline it real hard.
We're not here for animal cruelty, honestly.
I was going to say you lure it with a very attractive sort of leafed branch or something.
You pick off leaves and you put it down in a trail that leads to the ship. You hope for the best.
On behalf of everyone at the Archaeoanimals podcast and the Archaeology podcast network, we would like to apologise to our giraffe listeners for any brutality talked about in this episode. Alex.
Yeah, I'm on my way to alienate every single non-human listener to the podcast, and it's fine.
First it was the fish.
How would they even listen to it? Would they, like, how long would that cord have to be if you were listening to it with like a wired?
No, Alex, come on.
They would have
giraffes use Bluetooth. Come on.
Okay, but like, do think about the idea of a giraffe with like earphones in, and it's got.
This is like that image. Is like, would a giraffe wear his tie like this or like this?
I mean, these are the things that zoo archaeologists are afraid to talk about, but we're not here on the Archaeo Animals podcast.
I don't think we should be talking about this.
That's what they don't want you to know. How giraffes wear headphones.
Would a hippopotamus wear a pair of pants like long ways or like?
No, come on. Hippos wear PVC. Come on, like. How else do they, like jeans will get too soggy.
PVC, but that's not breathable at all.
No, you got holes. You got holes in the face for, like, just the eyes and the nose and the mouth, but you got holes in it.
Simona, don't look for logic in this conversation. It's gone.
Do you not fancy a tiger, Alex?
I guess I'm no Joe Exotic, but...
Wait.
Yay!
We said it. Right, that's ticked off. Okay. Do you know that was the start of lockdown?
Oh my gosh.
I'm not even joking. That was the start of this year.
Oh my god.
That feels a lifetime ago.
I've truly embodied the image of Robin Williams in Jumanji when he comes out of the game and he's like dressed in like leaves and stuff and he's going, "What year is it?" That's me now. For all you Jumanji heads out there.
But where would you wear your headphones?
We'll talk about Joe Exotic a little bit more like later, I think, or at least attempt
or
to,
not.
because some of us, the two hosts of this podcast have not watched that series. Who needs to stay topical? We're archaeologists. It's like the least important thing for us. What were we talking about? Oh, exotic pets. Examples of exotic pets.
That's the one. And how they would wear headphones.
Of course. So how would an ornamental fish wear headphones? Well, I mean, that's actually an example anyway, which is actually funny because when I was like thinking about this episode and we were talking about it, completely forgot about fish. Like just didn't even like track the idea of fish being an exotic species anywhere.
In a way, it still is a thing with ornamental fish. Because if you look at sort of freshwater aquarium fish, like a lot of the species are from South America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the most popular sort of outdoor pond fish is the koi carp.
Oh, yeah. But it's like probably one of the ornamental fish in general are apparently one of the earliest examples of exotic pets. They're seen as early as the Song Dynasty in China, which is pretty amazing and interesting, and also explains why my Gung, my Chinese grandfather, used to own a lot of ornamental fish when I was younger.
There's a lot of ornamental chicken breeds that originate from China, and some from quite far back. So like the Peking Bantam, I think the Silky is originally from China. I'm not too well versed in it, but it's sort of very sort of showy ornamental chickens wear a status thing.
Somehow, I don't know how to explain it in words, but as someone who is Chinese, that tracks. Like just the idea of like having ornamental animals in general tracks. All my other Chinese listeners know what I'm talking about. Woohoo. I think the thing that I thought about most of all when we're talking about exotic species was birds. And maybe it's because I had Egypt on the mind, but exotic birds were probably kept in Egypt as pets since 4000 BC, according to records, although the exotic bird trade really doesn't start off until open water sailing. Another example that I didn't think about until doing research is ferrets, which apparently were kept in captivity as early as 350 BC, but were only brought over as working animals to the US during the 1700s. And maybe it's just because I don't know much about ferrets. That was a shock.
Although, like, wouldn't ferrets technically be a domesticated polecat?
I guess. I don't know anything about ferrets, so...
I've not encountered many ferrets. In my experience, they're a bit bitey for me.
I didn't know anyone who owned a ferret when I was a kid, I think, because everyone was like, oh, they smell too much, so no one wanted to keep them.
Because I think they're not they are a fairly popular pet, but I think was not as popular, sort of like, your main cat, dog, rabbit sort of thing. I think they're still sort of, I think, extensively used as working animals. They get used for hunting.
Yeah, which is something I actually really didn't know. I just know ferrets is like the thing that like they chase around balls a lot from YouTube videos.
But how would a ferret wear headphones?
In its ears, duh.
I think I picture it more as wireless headphones, though. I think they're a bit more technological.
Yeah, probably.
Long story short, really, is just keeping exotic animals. I don't like the term exotic.
No, neither do I.
It's like the primitive breeds all over again.
Yeah, we need better terminology, folks.
I know, right? Let's get working on that. It's a trend that is seen throughout time periods, because even going back to birds, I mean, exotic birds kept in ancient Egypt. But to be fair, even in present day, you have pets, sort of, parrots especially, so parakeets or African greys, macaws, that are definitely not from here.
Mm-hmm.
But they are kept as pets.
Yeah, and then you even get to, I guess, the weird kind of tipping point that we'll discuss in the next part of the episode, but menageries and like private collections, and when does that actually just become a zoo, as being examples of kind of exotic species in places that they wouldn't necessarily be in as early as 1204 AD, when King John brought lions and leopards from Northwest Africa. And it became very en vogue to do that in the 18th century. So I'm sure we'll have a little debate on what the difference between a zoo and a private collection is.
Oh.
It's fine.
Sorry, my brain hurts thinking about it.
Sorry about that. All right. Well,
we'll take a break.
Yeah, we'll take a break.
Well, my brain hurts a bit. Yeah.
Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code ANIMALS.
Back to school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
And we're back, part 2 of another episode of Archaeoanimals. In this episode, we're talking about exotic species in the archaeological record. So I was once again trying to find a synonym for exotic.
It's not the greatest word, but it's one of those things, isn't it, that just becomes the established word, and I hate it. But I also could not think of a different version of that word. We're going to talk about it in a bit. But it's got really not great connotations, especially with ties to colonialism and stuff like that.
I've just looked at the Thesaurus dictionary. So we have foreign, non-native, not foreign, imported, introduced, unnaturalized, and then tropical, just nope. Alien, also nope.
I guess imported.
Or just... Because again, introduced would imply that you're introducing a population of the species, not Legionnaire Claudius found a lion and thought, why not, and brought him back to his villa.
Because, yeah, and imported, I think, has more of a connotation of this is my thing. This is that I'm bringing over, objectifying it. Which I guess isn't great either, but it probably gets the vibe across.
Yeah, but I guess also in that particular context, or in certain particular context, I guess that was the point, because you're sort of objectifying what you were bringing across, because look what I've got, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I guess that was the intent. It's not nice, but to put it mildly.
Anyway, well, we'll make do, I guess. But yeah, we are talking about, technically we're talking about exotic species, but we're mostly talking about exotic pets because that's fun. And I guess this is probably the best time to start talking about how do they even get into the archaeological record. As we said with the examples from the previous part, some of these animals traveled a heck of a long way to get to these places. And I think that's where we, again, hit those similarities between what we discussed in our invasive species episode, except these species were more intentionally brought over for some reason.
Other than food.
Yes, other than food, of course. Do you think they were like brought two over? Because they were like, well, we got to eat one, and then we got to bring the other one over.
I mean, more than likely.
Because like, if I had just seen a giraffe for the first time, my first thought would be like, that's so cool. We need to bring it back with us. My second thought would be, is that taste good? And then my third thought would be, how would they listen to a podcast?
Frankly, I am appalled that was not your first thought. Have you eaten today?
There's no point in me answering that question. We all know the answer, and it's no, I will never eat before a podcast.
What's the answer, dear listener? What is the answer?
Let's all say together, no.
Oh, God. This is the professional host that you've come to love on the Archaeological podcast.
Well, we're not the hosts you need, but we're the hosts you deserve.
That's really rude.
Once again, Simona knocking it out of the park. I love that. I love when the real Simona appears.
Babe Ruth over here, just knocking out of the park. My gosh.
That's all right. You've alienated all the non-human listeners. I've just alienated the humans.
Together, we will make it so this podcast is unlistenable.
Wasn't that already?
That's true. Yeah. What were we talking about again? Oh, how did they get here? We were just talking about that the word exotic isn't great to begin with, but there's a very important tie between the idea of exotic pets and colonization, and that increasing as we get longer transportation across the ocean. So I guess looking at, okay, we have exotic pets or exotic species in the zooarchaeological record. What does that tell us as zooarchaeologists? And I think the first thing immediately, other than wow, that's cool, is, wow, look at this, look at how much like miles they've traveled, with the breadth of the trade routes, which is interesting for sure. Yeah.
But it gives you an idea of sort of what the trade routes were and how far could certain populations reach.
Exactly.
Although not necessarily, because they could have traded sort of halfway.
And I guess in that also inherently implies, how big the breadth of like communication was across space. Because, maybe it wasn't necessarily that long of a trade route. Maybe they met halfway at a trading post or whatever. But you also get to see kind of like, who are they communicating with? What were the cultures that were interacting with each other? It's like when I was still doing Viking Age archaeology, it was like the thing I really enjoyed the most was looking at the trade between the East and Viking settlements. It's just really cool. I don't know where he's going with that.
Yeah, because I think you do find sort of Viking Age artifacts in Scandinavia that have really come from a long way away.
Yeah, it's really impressive and cool when you see it. I mean, like the trade between the Vikings and the Byzantine Empire and things like that. It's so cool because I think it just gives you like, it expands your mind. Like it's a real galaxy brain moment, to use the youth lingo. Just being like, oh, like I think we kind of just internally think of like the Vikings were Vikings, they stayed here, and the ancient Egyptians stayed in Egypt or whatever. When actually, they had their influence and their communication stretched way bigger than what you'd imagine.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. This episode has become like like a third of us actually talking about exotic pets, and then a third of us talking about what animals would wear jeans in what way and how they would listen to podcasts. And then another third is just us kind of talking about what the things we like most about archaeology, from what I've realized.
But yeah, which I guess brings us somehow to the question, why?
Which I guess I kind of answered, which is why not?
Yeah, a lot of it is why not? Well, some, as you suggested, may have actually been for food stuff, saying, "Oh, I found this thing. What's this thing? A camel. Good. I'm gonna bring him back and I'm gonna eat it." They would use them for performance. Again, like I think monkeys are a prime example in the Roman period. They would be used for performance. There's even evidence of exotic animals being used as working animals. As in literally like draft, is that the term? Yeah, draft animals.
Yeah.
Elephants. So there's some evidence of elephants being used for draft in the Roman period.
Which is wild, although I guess they are just giant bulldozing machines of the natural world.
But of course, I think on par with it just because the main reason...
Why won't you pay attention to me, Simona? And my good thoughts.
I shall not answer that.
Oh.
But I think on par with just because, I think the big reason, which I think often intersects, is status.
Oh, yeah.
Like, please glance upon all these animals that I have collected and I am now keeping in narrow cages. I am so powerful.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's that thing of, like, humans are going to human. It's the same reason why a lot of exotic pets are often illegally bought today. And I think this is where I'm going to go into my tangent about exotic pets today, because, okay, I found out some wild stuff. And yes, there's a drinking game for this podcast where every time I say wild, you can drink. Leave me alone. My brain can only handle so many words at a moment. There's private ownership of exotic animals is still permitted in a handful of states. And like, I went through this whole rabbit hole of looking at different legislation for exotic animals in the United States. And I mean, I guess, I don't know why I didn't expect that it was going to be really weird and out there. But like in some states, you have to have a license to own a dog, but you can just buy a baboon or a lion and without anything.
That must be like some serious loophole.
Yeah, and it's like, it's bizarre to me. There's probably like a whole thing that we could go into, and we will, because one of the things I remember from my hometown growing up was that someone got arrested for owning a boa constrictor and a alligator in their house.
As you do.
I mean, Long Island, baby, you know. We like to party. So if you're someone who watched the Netflix series Tiger King, feel free to, imagine what we would talk about and connect with that. But neither
if we had
Simona
watched it.
If we had watched it. Also, that was the weirdest thing. So I was thinking about like, oh man, if we had watched Tiger King, we'd probably have a lot more to talk about and like draw conclusions from like modern day to the past. And then I realized one of the articles I was reading to do research had a quote from Carol Baskin, who is a person.
Carol Baskin.
Yeah, exactly.
And was that
you have
wild?
to say it the right way. I'm not going to swear on the podcast, but you guys can fill it in,
Everyone probably did. I've not watched it.
Yeah, I have no idea the reference. I know Carol Baskin in terms of like who she is, and that's about it. And that she's just recently signed on to be on Dancing with the Stars. But
no, what? Oh,
yeah.
God. The competition better watch out, She's known to... I don't want her to slay on the ice as well,
Okay.
Yeah.
Although I think we should draw a line, because with exotic pets, it includes a variety of non-native species. So, of course, while some, are a lot more commonplace to say, that there's many people have African grey parrots as pets. I'm pretty sure there is paperwork that you need to have to keep one, but that's not quite a tiger. So I think also legislation varies because depending on the animal that you're acquiring and keeping as a pet. So there are, I don't know what the legislation is, because I thus far do not own any animal that isn't a domesticate.
And I think that brings us into like kind of the last thing that I really thought about when we were discussing this episode, which is kind of what is the difference, archaeologically speaking, between what we consider a zoo, basically, and just exotic pets that are house pets,
I guess it depends what you mean by zoo. Look, I'll explain, because I think the way we view zoos has thankfully changed an awful lot over time.
True.
So
yes.
Zoos have gone from just a place that showcases animals, and you go look at the animals and tap on the window and annoy them in weird and wonderful creative ways. They've gone more to almost a charity, well, no, not necessarily a charity, but they've become places of conservation. So yes, the animals are there for, in a way, for your entertainment, because you pay a ticket, you go to see them. The kids are enchanted, and it's beautiful and it's magical. However, it's also there for a reason other than your entertainment, because some serious conservation work is being done to, make the plight of some species known, but not just raising awareness, but actually doing something to preserve these animals.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe this is a really cynical reading of the change in zoos, but if that was just like, now this is the reason why zoos need to exist, instead of just being like, look at all the weird stuff we got. It's now like, oh, it's conservation. And it is true, obviously there are animals that can't be re-released into the wild. So, but it's interesting to note how like the modern day zoo is now like conservation is the forefront. Everything is about educating the general public about conservation and about, all that
But
stuff.
I find that a lot of it has changed in the way that displays, for lack of a better word, are made, because it seems a lot different from what I remember from my childhood. Like they seem to have sort of proper, or at least the zoos I've been to, proper sort of fully fledged habitats where if the animal cannot even that day and cannot be bothered to put up with visitors, they can just hide for the entire day, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which wasn't necessarily a thing that was the case before, or not across the board anyway. And I've seen a lot more sort of talks being given on the species and the species in the natural habitat and the conservation status. Like it seems to be definitely a change for the better.
Yeah, for sure. Although I will say, if you go to the United States, let me tell you, you will find some of those bare kind of exhibits where it's just a chain link fence. Let me tell you.
Well,
what's actually funny is that there's like, I don't know if it's a recent thing, but I see more of these wildlife sanctuaries in the United States where they're like smaller zoos, but they're specifically animals that have been rescued from being illegally owned by others. So that's like a new subset that's kind of popped up because of the exotic pet trade, which is really interesting and strange and weird, I guess.
Yeah, but I guess it's something good coming out of the bad.
Yeah,
that makes sense, because a lot of sort of these charities are like they rehome the animals and they give them sort of as much to a real sort of wild experience as they feasibly can, of course, being much removed from what their natural habitat would be.
Yeah. They get a fun tire swing.
And big boxes, because I've seen some wildlife sanctuaries with big cats and they get like big cardboard boxes.
I do love those videos.
Acting just like big kitty cats.
If they fit, they sit. It's true.
Felines much like humans.
I mean, if I fit, I sit. Let's be real.
Oh, me too. I am a champion of just sitting wherever I can fit.
Specifically in archaeological trenches. The amount of archaeological trenches that I've just sat down and not moved for hours is many. Anyway, let's take a break and we will be back with our case studies.
You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to arcpodnet.com/shop for a link. That's arcpodnet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show.
It's case study time, folks. Everyone's favorite part of the podcast.
Probably.
Yeah, I hope so. I like doing them, to be honest. And we actually have like a fair bit to talk about. We actually only have two case studies, but there's a lot, especially the second case study, which I'm sure you will just go wild on because it's Rome.
Maybe. Couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's get to it, and then we'll get you to Rome as soon as possible. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is one we actually kind of mentioned earlier in the episode, that they're exotic pets in ancient Egypt. So kind of probably like the most famous example of finding exotic species in archaeological context is the, I'm trying to remember how to pronounce this.
Well, the cemetery.
Yeah.
Hierakonpolis?
I think so. I used to be a classical archaeologist. I don't know what happened to me. There at the cemetery in Egypt from 5,000 years ago, archaeologists found skeletons like baboons, leopards, elephants, crocodiles found in the cemetery. And so the interpretation of that has been, it's either the exotic pets or even the personal zoo of wealthy owners that I guess were sacrificed once the owners died, which I believe is par for the course from what I remember being doing Egyptian archaeology.
Yeah, I guess wouldn't some get sold as souvenirs as well? So they had mummified, because it was definitely a case with mummified cats, but they would actually get sold by temples to pilgrims. It's like, would you like a mummified cat to remind you of your wonderful journey?
I mean, who among us? I would buy a mummified cat.
But yes, I guess what's interesting about these animals that were found in the cemetery, they were rife with pathology, unless they're mistaken.
Yeah, so the interpretation for that has been, there are all these injuries probably indicate that they were either mistreated or poorly handled. Again, kind of what we were talking about with the idea of exotic pets and how not great it is. This case study is pretty good because it hits on a couple of things we already talked about in terms of, why were they kept? It was probably kept for the symbolism of the animal and the kind of status that that symbolism would kind of, imply. So, for example, having a hippo represented strength. So, of course, whoever owns said hippo would be seen as a very strong person. And it's probably one of the earliest examples of a collection of exotic pets, to my knowledge. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that the exotic pet trade was much older than that, to be honest.
And I guess one thing with exotic animals in ancient Egypt as well is that certain animals are, of course, associated with certain gods. Mm-hmm. So, of course, sacrificing a certain animal was to please a particular god. Or I guess you could even have some exotic animal in your home, but put it under the guise like, oh, no, I'm not trying to show off. This is my own way of showing reverence to so-and-so god. Maybe.
I mean, do you think, I feel like that would probably track nowadays.
Yeah, it's like, no, it's religious. Mm-hmm.
This giraffe is religious. Why does it have headphones on? It's religious, I'm sorry.
Shall we go to Rome?
Yes, let's go to Rome. Let's let you go. Do your own thing. You do you, Simona.
I mean, at this stage, and probably even well before you listen to this podcast, you might have been aware of the fact that the Romans kept a lot of weird and wonderful animals because they could. I mean, some were kept as just really precious pets. Some, as I said, like monkeys come to mind, were kept to perform. But again, mainly for status, like, look, me, Augustus, manly man, look at all the lions I own. Wow, amazing. The animals would also be used for public hunts, known as venationes. Also, executions by beasts, the damnatio ad bestias, which was one of the Roman ideas of a fun time. So if someone got sentenced to death, they would be killed by hunters and or other animals in combat.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize that it's if an animal was sentenced to death. Like, that is wild. Like, obviously, so you have the executions by beasts, so that is if a person, was sentenced to death. But there was also animals could be sentenced to death as well.
He wore his headphones the wrong way round. What are headphones? I don't know. Spoiler. Because another main use of a certain exotic species by the Romans was, of course, warfare. I guess everyone's well acquainted with elephants being used as war animals. Pigs, although not an exotic animal, also extensively used in warfare. Of course, other examples of animals kept, ranging from leopards to elephants, bears, and lions, about which, actually, especially if you're dealing with lions, there is some incredibly helpful advice by our good old friend Pliny the Elder. So say, have you got a raging lion that won't calm down? Easy. Just throw a cloak over its head. Sorted. As calm as a kitty cat.
Yeah, I was going to say, this case study has a lot, I think, of us reading advice, because some of it is amazing.
I think Pliny's just a great go-to source for just work.
Oh, he rules so much, honestly.
I mean, there was also that enchanting story by Pliny telling you about that copy of the Iliad on parchment so small it fit in a nutshell. I mean, wow.
Yeah, Pliny was me in middle school trying to make friends by telling the weirdest stuff possible.
It's just Pliny's just my aspiration for when I grow up. You heard it right, when I grow up. Just travel the world and moan.
Well, to be fair, you're not Simona the Elder yet.
I'm the first of my name.
Okay.
I guess within my family context, I am the eldest of the Simona. But yeah, no, when I grow up, I want to be Pliny. I want to travel around the world and complain about stuff. Oh, I've been to this place. It's awful.
Well, I already do. I'm already Pliny, to be honest.
Going back to actual archaeological examples, a good representation of exotic animals in Rome, as in the land of the Romans, not Rome the city in itself, is found in the mosaics of a Roman villa in Piazza Armerina in Sicily. I think I might have mentioned it before, but it's this Roman villa that's renowned for its just beautiful sort of mosaic floors.
Mm-hmm.
And so each room sort of depicts different scenes, and there's one in a room, and the mosaic is called The Great Hunt, and it showcases, for instance, how elephants were captured and transported from Africa. So in a way, that sort of leads you to think that showing off the capture, so the amount of money and resources you could throw into capturing this elephant, was almost as important as actually owning the elephant.
Yeah, it's all about status again. Just the whole not only do I own this creature, this is how I got it. And I love how extra that is to be not only am I going to flaunt the fact that I have a lion, I'm also going to flaunt the fact that it took a lot of effort and a lot of resources to catch this lion. And I'm also going to commission a mosaic to show all the effort I put into catching this lion.
To show off how great I am for depriving this animal of its natural habitat. Well, we'll see.
I mean, in some ways, you have to respect that vibe of just wanting to show off. I kind of wish I had that level of self-confidence sometimes.
Yeah, I guess you should have shared that around a little bit. But yes, as you might have expected, figured out by this point, animals were frequently sourced from Africa and the eastern parts of the Roman Empire. They would be kept in enclosures called vivaria. Now, the vivaria specifically would normally either be municipality or state-owned, but of course privately owned animals were also a thing. But then the vivaria, I don't know if you had a vivaria for elephants, for example, then those could be drawn upon for warfare. So it would be a vivaria that supplied them. And of course, the means of capturing these animals were, it's not pretty is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, okay, so we'll return to our friend Pliny once again, who wrote this about capturing elephants in Africa. He wrote, men on horseback would chase the elephants into pits, where the animals would be left without food or water until they were physically depleted enough to be transported without too much trouble, which is great.
Easy done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still not as bad as how you'd lure a giraffe onto a boat.
I said all I was going to do was close, line it, to get a running start, I'd probably have to jump to reach the neck properly. And just, wrestlers do it all the time. It'll be fine.
No, we also got some great stuff from Armenia by Oppian. and how the Romans would capture bears over there. So they would identify the bear dens first, and then the hunters would drive out the animals with a cacophony of trumpets and cymbals.
As you do.
Yes. So, because the bear would come out in the open going like, what? Seriously? And the hunters would chase them into a hidden net that they previously set up.
Yeah.
So then, because they would restrain the bear by tying its limbs to wooden planks. And at this point, with the bear safely restrained and presumably tired out, it would be loaded into a cage of oak and pine. Make sure, like, none of that birch stuff, yeah? Oak and pine, for transport.
It's also the whole, like, the literal thing of, like, once they chased it into the net, it was the dangerous moment. Because at that moment, there's greatly rage with jaws and terrible paws.
Hashtag terrible paws.
Hashtag terrible paws.
Terrible chunky
Hashtag-
paws.
Ugh, I was just about to say that. What about the jaws?
Rage with jaws.
I guess with chunky jaws would probably be
Ragey jaws? Is ragey a word?
Ragey? Well, I was going to go with chunky jaws, but I realized that might be more indicative of a pathological thing.
Chompy? Because they chomp.
Chompy. This is why we have you on this podcast. For these kind of moments.
Yeah, that's what I learned English for.
Exactly. Yeah, on one hand, I have to say that these hunters were extremely brave to just kind of go up to a bear den and play trumpets and cymbals and chase it out into a net. But on the other hand, wow.
And they're going to be non-PC, but where do you draw the line between brave and stupid in this instance?
That is true. I guess they were paid pretty well. If the person was also going to make a mosaic showing them catching said bear and also, pay to get the bear.
No, where you'll be like, oh no, I can't pay you to get the bear, but I'll give you exposure.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Ding, ding, ding. Well, there we have it.
That might be the funniest thing that's ever been said on this podcast.
That is. I want that on a t-shirt.
Can someone draw like a mosaic and then have that on the bottom?
It's amazing. Once again, Simona takes the crown. Oh. It's
the thing of humans always being humans. There clearly was definitely people in ancient Rome who were like, I'll pay you for the exposure. Is Simona crying?
I said exposure. I didn't specify. Okay, of course meant exposure to the elements. While you're catching the bear.
We are talking about bears, aren't we?
Yes.
Exposure, bear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow, you really ruined that, huh?
Shut up. I'm still funny, okay?
Hashtag I'm still funny.
Hashtag still funny.
This episode hasn't given me room for a pun yet, so.
Yeah, I'm shocked, to be honest.
You know what? I don't want to take Simona's thunder.
Yeah.
Is it because you couldn't think of one? Like, have you been ruminating this whole time?
I've been making notes.
Oh, gosh. Do you have, notes for every episode that's just, your pun files?
Yeah, well, I listened back to some of the episodes from my best ones.
Is that going to be, a supercut?
Should put as bonus content for the show, Tristan's puns.
I mean, is that really bonus content for anyone? Is it the opposite of bonus content?
Do you know, if you're not careful, I'll put together all the times Alex groans when I make a pun, like a complete supercut of,
yeah, it's no, I just become Tina from Bob's Burgers. Someone make that into their ringtone, and I'll give you a solid high five when we're allowed to again. I don't know.
See, exposure all the way down.
Yeah. To be fair, I am a broke PhD student. All I have to give is exposure these days. Anyway, I think that's it. I think we're all out of it.
I think it better be it at this stage.
Yeah, well, that was another episode of Archaeanimals. As always, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, recommend us, like us, review us. I don't know what else I say at the end of these episodes anymore. We're on Twitter at Archaeoanimals. Tell us all of the fun Tiger King jokes we could have made in this episode that we didn't because neither of us have actually watched that series.
And of course, if you have any hate mail, send that to Tristan's personal account.
Yep, send it to Tristan.
Every time. I'm still very, very, like, I still have not received any hate mail. So I assume from that, people absolutely love the show.
Oh, I'm collecting it. I'm going to get it bound
Totally.
and send it to you. It'll be a textbook.
Oh, brilliant.
But it's just written by me, so it's fine.
Ooh, wow. That's a burn. That's a burn and a half. So where can people find more of this wonderful content?
You can find it at the Archaeology Podcast Network.com. We're a .com, right? And we go
Yes,
also
we've
find
always
it.
been .com.
I don't know. You can find us wherever you download your podcasts. iTunes, the Googles. What else is there? Spotify? I don't know.
Wherever you get your podcasts from.
If you get it from a person on the corner of your street, I'm sure they can give you a copy of Archaeoanimals from LiveJournal.
And you can find our hosts on Twitter as well if you want to bother them there, or send us suggestions. How can the show even has a Twitter, doesn't it?
I said the show Twitter.
What is the show Twitter? It's at Archaeoanimals, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's Archaeoanimals with an A-E. Archaeoanimals.
Oh yes, the proper spelling.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Thank you for listening to Archaeoanimals. Please subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. You can find us on Twitter at Archaeoanimals. Also, the views expressed on the podcast are those of ourselves, the hosts and guests, and do not necessarily represent those of our institution, employers, and the Archaeology Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.